Hey guys, it's Stephanie here. I'm an online marketing coach for independent beauty professionals, and I wanted to ask you something. Are you in a small town? Meaning, are you in a town with a population of less than 50,000? And do you sometimes feel like being in a small town as a hairstylist, esthetician, or beauty pro, do you sometimes feel like it's holding you back? Like you feel like there's too much competition, it's too saturated, my prices have to be low, there's fear of judgment, there's all these different things that happen when you're in a small town trying to build a business that you feel like, oh, if I just lived in New York City or LA or anything like that, that it would be easier for me. So many of my community members are in this exact situation, and that's why I'm so excited to share my interview with Casey Taylor. Casey is a small town hairstylist in Texas, and she helps other beauty pros who are in little villages, towns, hamlets, whatever you want to call them, to actually see the positive side of growing their business in a small town. She teaches you how to differentiate yourself, how to stand out in a saturated market, how to raise your prices, and how to show up as an incredible professional even in a small town. And guess what? There are a lot of benefits to building your business in a small town. So without further ado, let's get into my interview with Casey. Casey, thank you so much for making the time to chat with me. I'm so excited to chat with you today about being a small town hairstylist or beauty pro. And this is such a cool topic. So many of our community members are in the same position as you are and you were when you were first starting your career. So I'm really, really pumped up to chat with you. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be chatting with you and sharing everything about being a small town stylist.
Yeah, okay. So tell me a little bit about who you are, where you live, what kind of context you're in, and how you started out helping hairstylists and other beauty professionals who were in the same kind of shoes as you are in.
Yeah, so I live in Lindale, Texas. It's a small town in East Texas. And I have been doing hair for the past 9 years, I think now, which is crazy to say out loud.
Yeah, I know time
And
goes by so quickly.
yes, and so I have been working in my small town the majority of that time. And when I became a small town stylist, something that was kind of looming over me was that I was told by one of my cosmetology school instructors that we would never be successful in a small town. It would be so hard to build a career in a small town. And so that kind of held me back for a while. So
Was she essentially
whenever
saying
I
when
finally,
you graduate, you should move into a big city kind of thing? Like don't even bother
yeah,
staying where you are?
yeah, exactly. And so whenever I ended up having to work in my small town because moving to the city wasn't working, I realized that she was completely wrong,
Mm.
actually, and that there was potential to be successful in a small town and I could have the career I wanted. So I created my dream career, and now I have dedicated another aspect of my career to helping other small town stylists kind of overcome those challenges and create that life and career of their dreams without having to move or leave the small town that they love.
Yeah, I love that. There's so many people that come from small towns. I mean, whether that's 500 people or 20,000 people. I saw on your Instagram post, small town has different meanings, but I think that people sometimes feel scared of oh my gosh, do I have to move to a big city or something like that in order to be successful? We see so many people on Instagram who are in Los Angeles and they're having the career of their dreams, and people are oh, do I need to do that in order to be successful? So I love that you are living proof and you help other hairstylists to do the same. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges maybe that your instructor thought that you would have, or that kind of are actually true, that are unique to small town stylists, or some of those mentalities or anything that you feel people come up against, so they're oh, people in big cities don't have to deal with this.
Yeah, so I think there's kind of this saying in a lot of small towns that there's a bank and a church on every corner. And the third one is hair salons. And so there seems to be this mindset that it's just an oversaturated market. There's
Right.
too many salons, too many stylists, and not enough clients to go around. And I also think there's kind of this limiting mentality that small town clients don't want these luxury services. They want to pay lower prices because it's in the small town. And I would say that both of those things are not true. I totally understand the oversaturated market kind of mindset, because that was something that I think that was really the point that my instructor was making. And it kind of seemed to make sense in the moment. But after working in a small town, I would say that that's no longer true, because it's more being unique. And I do think there's also other challenges, like there aren't a lot of commission-based salons that you could work at. You have to pretty much go straight to booth rent a lot of times, because you do have less opportunities to be an assistant or to kind of go that path with your career. Which, trying to jump straight into being independent as a fresh stylist out of school kind of sounds like career suicide in a lot of ways. And I don't think that it has to be, but it is definitely a unique challenge that I faced a lot, being independent and being a newer stylist in my small town.
How did you I want to chat with you about how you actually built up your clientele in your business, but first, wasn't that really intimidating going out on your own so early? And did you feel kind of pressure to work for that local big salon where people saying, oh, just get a job down the street, before you go out on your own kind of thing?
Yeah, it was definitely very scary, because you don't really know what you're doing. And I don't know about anybody else's cosmetology school experience, but mine, I did not get a lot of education that I needed for the real world. It was more about passing my, state board exam to get my license. And they're like, okay, that's good enough. You can sanitize everything, which is great. But I had no idea how to do a balayage. I really had no idea what I was doing with color theory in general. And so there was a lot of learning as you go. And I think too, whenever you're going into these booth rent salons and you are a newer stylist, you're kind of looking at everyone around you okay, well, what are they doing? Is that what I want to do? Does that work? Is that how this is done? So I think it was important for me to kind of absorb from the stylists around me, but also to learn what I didn't like or did like from that and adapt it to what I wanted to be as a stylist.
Yeah, I love that. So you essentially went out on your own. Did you work for anybody at first, or were you just straight to booth rental?
I did actually go to a bigger city and worked commission salons for about a year. I don't think it was a full year. I think it was the first 9 months after graduating. I worked at some commission salons, 2 different commission salons, one that was the big chain and one that was a smaller, slightly locally owned. So I do think that helped me a lot in learning some of my color theory. But the problem was they were far away. I didn't want to drive an hour every day and just one way to get to work. I really wanted to be in my hometown, and I wanted to do my career differently too.
Yeah, and it sounds like you did. You found your own path. So when you went out on your own in your town and now you have local clientele, how did you get over that first challenge of being able to differentiate yourself in a quote unquote saturated market? How did you go about that when everyone kind of was telling you oh, everybody goes here, or this is the place where everybody goes. Everybody already has their hairstylist. Nobody needs someone new. What were the first things that you did to start actually attracting clientele, even though you felt maybe that there was a lot of competition?
Yeah, so I think a lot of what I did was kind of on accident. I don't think I necessarily knew what I was doing in the beginning that was working. But what I realized was that I didn't want to market myself as this discount bargain stylist. That's what I had constantly seen in small towns. Oh, we'll just offer 20% off and give free haircuts and this and that to try and get people in the door. You just need to discount, do it for cheap so that you can get clients and worry about the rest later. I did not love that approach. I didn't want to be a bargain stylist. I didn't want to be doing roller sets and haircuts all day long. I love color. I love styling. And Now I love extensions. And so I wanted that kind of clientele. And so whenever I would market myself, I would always try to market more to the value that I offered
Right.
and I was as a person rather than a discount.
And did you feel like you had to be like better, more skilled, and have like something to differentiate yourself that way compared to other hairstylists and salons?
You're definitely intimidated as like a younger
Yeah.
baby stylist. I definitely knew that I was not bringing a ton to the table when it came to my skill set, but I wanted to. So I think it was kind of a fake it till you make it kind of scenario.
Yeah.
And it honestly had more to do with how you show up as an individual than it was your actual talents. How you are caring for your clients when they come into your chair and you're like really giving them your undivided attention. You're not trying to rush them in and out. You pay attention to those little details of the service about being on time, offering them a water, you know, truly taking the time to ask them what they want with their hair went a long way. And I think that kind of translated more than my talent necessarily in the beginning and set me apart a lot.
Yeah. Did you feel like you were focusing on these things, like the customer service, the experience, because you saw how other salons and stylists have been doing it and they just kind of like were looking over that kind of experience? Like they weren't focusing on it?
Yeah, I feel like there was like a lot of like, okay, well, the way you make more money is to get people in and out. It's all about speed and quantity of people
Yeah.
in your chair. And I wanted the more quality client. And I had heard several complaints from clients when they would sit in my chair. Oh, yeah, like my last stylist, they just kind of did whatever they wanted. They never listened to me and what I wanted out of my service. They
Right.
never really cared about what I wanted my hair to look like. They just did what they wanted to do. And so just listening to people, I think, added an extreme amount of value to the service just because they want to feel seen and heard. And that's really kind of what getting their hair done is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you focused on that. And like that's such a good way to build up that loyal clientele who tells other people and keeps coming back to you. I'm curious how you got the ball rolling though. Like did marketing yourself and advertising yourself when this was, I guess you said 9 years, so like I guess like around then. Like how did you start doing that and get your name out there in a place that was like pretty small? Do you feel like it was different from somebody who's maybe like starting out in a bigger city?
Yeah. So back then, 9 years ago, social media was totally different than what it is today. Instagram was a thing, but not super popular within my small town
Mm-hmm.
for sure. Even just within like, high schoolers. Like I got an Instagram like my senior year, but I didn't use it all that
Yeah.
much and nobody knew what I was doing. It was kind of the beginning of that like Periscope era and really big name, the OG hairstylist on Instagram, kind of starting the balayage education. Um, but that wasn't anything that I had used at the time to market my business because I knew no one in my small town was actually looking there
Right.
for hair stuff. Facebook was kind of king. And honestly, to this day, Facebook is still king in my small town. I was deep into those mom groups, the like garage sale swap and shop groups that I know get a bad rap for being like bargain hunter-y.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they were so valuable and honestly like the biggest tool that I used building my clientele initially. And I think it was less about posting like, oh, like I'm having this special or anything like that in there. I would just show up and post like a picture of myself, a picture of some hair I had done, and basically just said like I am a hairstylist that is newer to the area as far as working, and I would love to have you in my chair. This is what I'm offering. And I would say like all of my color services do come with a complimentary haircut and deep conditioning treatment, and kind of like sold it as a package rather
Yeah.
than a la carte services. And so I think showing up as me as a person helped a lot, because that got my face in the community, and, showing them the value that I had in those groups.
Yeah, I love that. So this was 9 years ago, and you said that Facebook is still big for you, maybe bigger than Instagram for like your salon side of business.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a huge following on Instagram as far as my education goes. And I definitely have a few clients who find me there, here and there. But for the most part, I still find that a lot of my really loyal clients, it's word of mouth, and they jump to Facebook to look up my business.
Yeah.
It seems in experience that small town clients are still using Facebook more to like look up a business that they want to contact, or a
Yeah.
service provider that they want to contact, over searching them on Instagram.
Interesting.
And so I think that there's a lot of education around utilizing Instagram, and I think that's wonderful. But the truth is, in my small town, it's still just not like the main driving force. And that doesn't mean that I don't still post some stuff to Instagram, but I get more messages from Facebook and more clients telling me that that's how they discovered me.
That's so cool and interesting. Do you feel like that is like, because I know that you teach and educate other small town stylists too. Do you feel like that's a trend that it's kind of you teach them to use Facebook and you find that Facebook is best for them, or does it just completely depend?
I think that everybody's situation is going to be different, because no two small towns are alike. But I do find that small towns tend to like take longer to jump on the trends, and they're all about community.
Yeah.
To me, that's like the key difference with a small town. Everything's about community, and Facebook is a little bit more interactive as far as the community aspect of it versus something like Instagram or TikTok.
Yeah. So what other ways, I know you said that word of mouth was also big for you, and I love that you talk about community. What are some other ways that you have grown your business and really become known as like the, I mean, high value and I mean just incredible hairstylist that you are in your town? Like how have you built that name for yourself using like word of mouth and community?
I have really spent a lot of effort into just pouring into my community. So I think it's so much more than just, showing up to one community event. I try to show up to all the different local things going on. I will go to the football games on Friday nights, because those are huge in our small town. It's all about football. Just really pouring into the community that way, and like showing up.
Right.
It's all about getting your face seen so that people can learn to trust you. Because to me, that's the thing in small towns, is they don't really trust you unless they know that you're like there and you're involved and you're committed to the small town.
Yeah, interesting. So like you'll go to the football games and do you try to like tell people that you're a hairstylist? Do you like give out business cards? Like what do you do so that they connect your face with your business?
I think it's just about like having conversations with people. There have been some like local festivals where I've done some like braid bars where I'll set up a booth and do some braids and some hair tinsel and maybe some like hair colored sprays, stuff like that. And usually at those events, I take the day. I might team up with like a local dance team that wants to do a fundraiser, and those girls will all get their hair braided and walk around, and then everybody's like, oh, your hair's really cool. Where did you get that done? And although I'm not necessarily marketing my clientele for these young girls, these like 7-year-olds that are walking around with these cool braids, they all have moms.
Yeah.
They all have an aunt. They all have like an older sister or a cousin. And even just being at that event, and I think people seeing my face in that booth and that my salon is involved in that, goes a long way in them seeing that I'm like connecting with the community and investing in other, community. I don't know if it's not events, but activities and stuff like that.
Oh, that's so cool. So you said that there's this kind of like mindset of like, if people don't see you and they don't like constantly see you active, they just don't trust you. They don't really like make that I guess connection of like, oh, I'd love to come in and, you know, see Casey for my hair. What other kind of mindsets have you kind of had to understand or harness or really take into consideration as a small town stylist that maybe other people who are in bigger cities don't have to?
Um, that's a really interesting question. I think there is this like cliquish mentality in small towns that's really unique to overcome. If you can get somebody who is like a small town celebrity in your chair, it can go a long way in
Yeah.
like boosting your. And a small town celebrity doesn't have to be somebody who is, the actual famous person of the small town. Because Miranda Lambert's from our small town, so
Oh,
we've
cool.
got a big country.
Yeah.
I don't do hair, but like the funeral owner's daughter, she knows everybody because everybody has, been involved with a funeral one way or another. And so doing her hair, kind of everybody was like, oh, she gets her hair done there? Well, like we should get our hair done there.
Yeah.
And, of course you only want to seek out people who are your ideal clients. But I think, stuff like that goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
And also I feel like small towns are just a lot more personal.
Yeah.
And a lot more about connecting with people on a personal level. It doesn't always have to be about like, oh, well, I'm here because I'm like trying to market my business, but I'm here because I care about people, and they value that a lot.
Yeah, I bet. I love that. So what was going to be my other question about, about mental, like kind of like the mindset part of thing of having a business in a small town. I've had a bunch of my students say like when talking about self-promotion, especially on Instagram, because they're in a small town, they just feel this like kind of like social like judgment or anxiety of like, oh my gosh, like I'm worried to show up because I feel like everybody's looking at me. Like I feel like people are talking behind my back. A lot of that is just invented, but like is that something that you kind of had to overcome too, of like worrying what people think about you on Facebook or on Instagram and just like, oh, who does she think she is kind of thing?
Yes. It was really crazy because I think initially I wasn't as nervous about that as I became later, as things started growing a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
I have definitely had issues with like other hairstylists saying things, behind my back, kind of gossiping, like, oh, well, who does she think she is to charge those prices here?
Right.
And I can't believe she's not going to do haircuts anymore and she's only doing color. And why does she think she can offer these extensions here? Like, it's never going to work. So I totally empathize with, the people that have those fears.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found that anyone who does have something negative to say, which I don't think is really that many people,
we build it up a lot in our heads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The few people that are saying stuff like that, it's really a them problem and not a you problem. It's more about, their limiting beliefs and their, jealousy that they aren't doing the same thing in their business, because it's usually other hairstylists. I have never had clients say stuff about what I'm posting. They are only ever like excited to see my post. Yeah. Even posting stuff for like other hairstylists of my education. I have so many of my clients that are like invested in those posts and they love seeing them. And it's funny because they'll come back after, being somewhere, hearing something, because everything in a small town gets around. They're like, oh yeah, this stylist said like, well, Casey's just bougie, or that your prices are too high or whatever. Meanwhile, that same client that's telling me about this is sitting in my chair paying my prices and, cheering me on for everything that I'm doing.
Yeah.
So, it can be very scary, especially like, I know I had raised my prices higher than the salon owner, that when I was booth renting initially, and different things like that. It's this thing of like self-confidence and doing things differently than everyone else has been doing it for forever. But there has to be a first somewhere.
Yeah.
And being able to stand out that way, I think, is a tool that you can use to your advantage, and something that can be really rewarding if you push past that fear and actually utilize it and go for it.
Yeah, I love that. And you were just living proof that that is absolutely possible. I love that you have made such a incredible business for yourself locally. And I also love that you help hairstylists and other beauty professionals to kind of become the go-to name in their small towns as well. If anyone wants to connect with you, learn from you, do you have a program that you teach?
Yes. So you can always connect with me on Instagram at Casey Taylor Stylist. I love sharing education there, but I also have a group coaching program called the Small Town Stylist Collective that I open up periodically. I also do one-on-one coaching, and I love just connecting with people in general through the DMs. So, tons of ways to get education and tons of ways that I love supporting people and helping them achieve their goals.
I love that. Thank you so much for chatting with me, Casey. I learned so much. I think it's so amazing what you're doing, and I know that you're going to inspire so many other people. So thank you for coming on and chatting with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so great.
Yeah, it was awesome. Okay, guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again next week for another marketing video. Talk soon.